What does your school's dream makerspace look like? Will AR and VR tools ever impact K-12 education in a significant way? How are students using 3D printing, laser cutting, and sublimation to create? Welcome back to another episode of the Teachers on Fire podcast, airing live on YouTube every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. My name is Tim Cavey, and my mission here is to warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. Today's Teacher on Fire is Jesus Huerta. Jesus is an education technology coach who believes that access to technology should not be determined by demographics. He believes that improved technology in the classroom can lead to higher engagement and spark student interest in STEAM careers from a young age. Jesus is a lifelong learner who constantly develops his practice through joyful experimentation. You can connect with Jesus on LinkedIn, of course by searching his name, on X at JesusH1979, on TikTok at the same address, and on Instagram at Mr. Huerta's Class. So Jesus, just seeing those handles makes me think you and I are a very similar age. Welcome back to the podcast, my friend. Are you ready to light it up?
Yeah, when you started with questions, I was already ready to start answering. I'm like, oh wait, he's doing his intro.
It is so good to have you back. So it's been 4 years, and faithful listeners of the podcast might remember Jesus on a number of years ago, again, during COVID. It was right at the beginning of COVID, and there we were sort of making sense of our time, and we had a really good conversation. Quite enjoyed it. My friend, it's hard to believe that 4 years have elapsed, but here we are, and thankfully the pandemic is in the rearview mirror. So before we get into your mission and your work, I do want to talk about where you've been and maybe a challenge that you've faced over the last 4 years. Could you share something from either the pandemic or the time since that has been a challenge for you, some form of adversity, and then let us know how you overcame it?
I think it's a really, really good question. And I think that's something that, principals should ask their teachers. Because I think a lot of us were just happy to come back into the classroom and go, well, everything's way better now, which it was. I mean, during the pandemic, it was really, really hard. But I think for me, and I've never been asked that question, like, what have you had, challenging since you guys came back, which this is our third year back in, because it was towards the end of 21. I think for me, the biggest thing has been, how do I keep teachers motivated? And it's challenging, but how do I keep myself motivated? Because I'm not gonna lie, I came out of there pretty down. I think if it had gone on another year, I don't know if I would still be teaching. I know it's a scary thing to say, and some people might say, "Oh, well, don't say that," because what if? Well, I mean, you have to be honest. Also, I think you got to say truths, even if it stings a little. So yeah, I came out of it pretty down, and my students came in. I'm like, these kids are not like, they're not disciplined. They're not this, and so. I think the hardest part for me was, okay, I'm already down and I'm going from, I got to be here to here somehow, at least for 6-7 hours during the day. And so it took a lot to kind of just make sure, like, okay, how do I really leave it at the door? But at the same time, I started working on things that I think would make me not just better, but happier at the same time. Like, let me make sure I take time for myself, which I'm really bad about. And so I think that helped, but I think just getting asked that question when I saw it, because I know you had asked me before about it, and I was like, you know what? I just felt relieved when they came back in, but I never really thought about like what affected me since then, these last 4 years. And I think it was that initial like launch of back into the classroom. I was still down, and I had other stuff going on in my life. But you know what? Family, friends, just talking to other people. I mean, it helped to get ideas from them and just understand, like, you know what? Yeah, this is tough for me now, but some people do have it worse. But how can I help those people too? Because I mean, I don't have it as bad as them. So
I really like that focus that you gave yourself. Like, what is going to make me happy during this time? And I, within my brand, of course, of Teachers on Fire, I think about what is going to bring back your fire. I almost feel like a daily journal entry for teachers has to be, what is a moment of joy that I can look forward to in my day? And if you have trouble answering that question, I think that points to a deeper problem. So I love the renewed focus on just finding those moments of joy, experiences that bring back your fire, whether it's in your practice, hopefully there's some there, but also in your personal life. I think that's so
And I
important.
think right now when you said that, like what went well today, what do teachers really do? I shouldn't have that tone with that one kid. And they don't look at like, come
Mm,
on, the rest was great. That was a mistake, but we
right.
focus on it because we have that perfect teacher mentality. So
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. Now, Jesus, we joked a little bit off air about how you're much more than just a 3D printer, but I thought let's start here because this is something that you're known for. So I'm curious to sort of hear an update since the state of 3D printing 4 years ago. How do you feel like 3D printing has evolved over the last 4 years? Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. And do you think schools are realizing the opportunities that present themselves today?
So yeah, we were before we started. Everybody is listening. We were talking. I was at a conference and I was presenting on project-based learning and how working with English language learners it can help them develop their language skills. But my buddies were like, "Oh, you're presenting? Wait, 3D printing?" And I'm like, "No, I'm going to talk about it in there though." But your question, it has evolved a lot. But really, for teachers, like I'll say K to 8, because in high school you're gonna have more of that specialized class, like a CTE course, and they're gonna need something. Not that the printer I'm gonna talk about is like, oh, it's not accurate. It's very accurate, but you might need something way higher end, but it's like super specialized machine, like for robotics or something like that. But even one of these printers it's good enough for me. I'm like, yeah, this is perfect for robotics. It's the Bamboo line of printers, BAMBU. They have true self-balancing. So I would see that in other printers, but really it was like an assist, and you still have to put a piece of paper and did I get it right? And some of them, the assists were not very good, or would save the information, but that really doesn't do anything because if that glitches out or messes up, I still have to adjust it. And that takes time to learn. And for a teacher that's like, I want to produce the products, but I have a hard time learning anything mechanical like that, or I've never really used, any kind of, not even like a Cricut. How do I get started? So the Bamboo one doesn't even have like little dials underneath the print bed, which has to be balanced. Um, it does automatically. It has a mini LiDAR system in it. That's incredible on itself. But it'll measure every time, so it makes a bunch of noise for like 2 minutes, and then it just goes. And it's super fast. One brand of printer that I bought, to kit printer that you build, if it could do a model in 6 hours, say something complicated, something big, this one will do an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so really what we want is the design part, like Tinkercad or like Fusion 360 or Blender. We want that to be the focal point, like design something that's gonna, look cool to sell, entrepreneurship, can help people like prosthetics. But running the machine for some teachers, they're like, I haven't used it in 6 months because it's somebody balanced it for me. That's the story I usually hear. And now I don't know how to do it. But this one does it. It even warns you like, oh, the first layer is the most important one because if it doesn't adhere, it could mess up later and slide off or whatever. It actually inspects it for like a couple minutes and says, "Hey, I found a flaw," or "Okay, that's meant to be there," and it learns from it, keeps it in its system like an AI type of system. So for me, the biggest thing has been in the last year and a half this line of printers, and a lot of people are copying that. A lot of other companies, but if I told you, Tim, hey, there's just, and I sound like a salesman, I know, but here's a printer, you just send it, you don't have to worry about it. And it does actually four materials at the same time, so you could pull in colors. So it looks like a item produced and to be sold at Target or Walmart. How much do you think that would cost?
5,000?
Under 500. It's
Wow.
450.
Wow. Incredible.
Without the multi material system, the AMS, it comes in right at 330. And then when you buy it from them, they're like, "Oh, here's like a 30% discount on plastic," and their material is great because you put it near the printer, and it has a little it's an RF reader, and it automatically updates the printer. Oh, this is the material color you're using. Oh, it's like driving like a Toyota. You're like, oh, this is smart. Oh, this is so well. Everything you could think of is in there, and it's not even $1,000. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that's happened. And I'm answering this kind of long, but I'll make the next part short. Um, For me, the biggest part of it is when the child sees something produced that they actually made and they're holding it. It's great. Like right now, I have a group of fifth graders. They're writing a quick, 3-paragraph essay. That's what we want, the content, about someone they respect. Who is it? Why do you respect them? And the third one's the kicker for fifth graders. It's how can you change yourself to be more like that person? Like what? How can you have that trait? What trait could you counter so you could be more organized, more polite, or whatever? And for some of them, they were like they had to speak up front, and that's what I wanted. But I look at their designs, and they're so great, and that's the hook. And I think if teachers throw one of these printers in our classroom, it's like having three of the other kind of printers. They could use it every month. Hey, here's a project on 3D printing, and the kids won't get tired of 3D printing, but also gives them time to print everything. But with that printer, they'll be done in 2 weeks. And so for me, are they going to learn English directly from a 3D printer? No. But, can I throw a piece of meat, a piece of chicken breast and boil it with no flavoring? Yeah, I'm still getting the protein. But if I season it up, spice it up, guess what? I enjoy it more and I get more out of it.
That's good. And it makes me think of our friend Gabriel at EdTech Bites, that mix of education and food that you just brought together there. But that's really encouraging. I think what I'm hearing there is that technology is really improving in exciting ways and making more possible in the classroom. Lana on LinkedIn is joining us. Welcome, Lana. She says, indeed, starting and finishing your day with moments of joy is so key to celebrating and sharing moments that inspire teachers. What a wonderful way to jump into the makerspace with 3D tools and more terrific work. Thank you so much for that comment. Let's move on, Jesus, and go further into the makerspace. And I want to, that's somewhere where I want to get in this conversation, is what would be your dream makerspace. But before we get there, tell us about your work with laser cutting and sublimation. These are activities that I don't see a lot of. So what are students able to design and create in these niches?
And get them to sound like a salesman, but we grabbed a laser cutter that's very easy to use. That one doesn't break the bank, 1200, and it has an air filter to be put in any classroom. So we grabbed a few of those for a small summer school program. And so the teachers had to learn it. Some had some experience, some didn't. We had one teacher with no experience in 3D printing. They got a couple of those printers I talked about. They got a laser cutter and they got an inkjet printer and a sublimation machine, which is just like a t-shirt press. And so the project was the kids had to work in pairs and they had to come up with a small business and design something that could be sold. They could sell t-shirts, but then they had to create swag to promote their company with a 3D printer and laser cutter. If they created like a laser design, for example, you could find like, how to cut it as a puzzle and sell custom puzzles with people's pictures on it. One of the teachers figured out, oh, you know how we can sublimate on, fabrics and the bags? Because we bought like these little kits that have bags, mouse pads. I just saw that you could sublimate on the watch wristbands. Now I want to know how to do that because I know you can laser etch onto it. And he figured out, oh, we can press onto the wood and laser cut around it. The kids ran with that idea. So what they thought they were doing was just making things and pretend, but we were asking them some tougher questions towards the end, like, so how much did you pay for that, like to make it? And how much did you sell it for? And they're like, well, I want to sell it for 50. And somebody goes, well, $50, I might as well go buy two of these. And they're like, I go, so what do you need to do? Oh, I need to do research. It's called market research. I said, look it up and it's so different from what you're thinking of. So what we're doing now though is in our makerspaces, we have 7 elementaries. They all will have a laser cutter in there and they already have sublimation tools. Because again, I think the more you offer in a classroom, and it doesn't have to be tech, it could be like, you know what, I have a little maker's corner and it has Play-Doh and popsicle sticks. That's perfect. I think giving kids the opportunity to make something, it gives them a different voice. If they can talk out loud about it, like present it through a slideshow, that's another voice. Can I just stand up and read what I wrote? That's another voice. Can you 3D design something and express it? The more voices I have available from, the more students I can listen to. And for me, it takes a long time. I mean, I've been using this stuff for like 10 years. I'm not saying, hey, this is so easy. You can learn it in 3 months. No. But I would always say, you know what? Pick the tool that's calling to you because that's the one you're going to jump into the most, even at home. And it's going to seem easy, but because you're willing to put in the time because you fell in love with that tool. But so yeah, that's something that we've done with laser cutting and sublimation, and it's actually a high school project we did last year because one of the teachers has a makerspace. She has 2 rooms, and she has
Mhm.
a nice makerspace in the back. And she goes, "I don't know what to do with all this stuff." I'm like, "Okay, just do a project." And same thing, small business, and the kids keep talking about like, "Wait, if I go to a college and they have that, could I sell the stuff?" Just ask the school if it's okay if you make stuff there to sell, and if they say it's okay, there you go.
I love the point about you've got to connect first with the tool that you're most interested in yourself, because that's the one you're going to experiment with at school and at home. And once you start to have that joy and some success yourself, you're going to be able to share that with your students. So that is really fascinating. And it's exciting to me to hear about all of the growing number of tools and choices and voices, as you said so well, that students have in the classroom. In my elementary school, we're working on this year's edition of the Young Entrepreneurs Market. And so you're making me a little bit jealous. I'm wishing we had a few more tools around that they could rely on, but hopefully they'll be able to come across some of their own as well. Actually, before we move on, we've got my brother chipping
Hey,
in here saying a 3D printer will definitely revolutionize the classroom. And Dope Teacher, great convo. Yes. Now, this individual, Dope Teacher, I don't know if you see his stuff on X, Jesus, but wow, he's got a full shop going on. So he's
nice.
Makerspace at the next level, and his kids are creating all kinds of things. Let's talk PBL. You did mention PBL in passing with that workshop. What's one example of project-based learning that you've seen in the last year, maybe the last 4 years, that has you excited about the future of education?
So and it's not even my own thing. It's something that I was already doing
Hmm.
before, like trying to have students make prosthetics.
Right.
But there is a let me just find it real quick, just so I don't misquote it. Jason Young out of England. He has Print Lab, and they offer tutorials way better than mine. I'm not gonna lie, I'm jealous. Um, but everything that they do is just geared towards, how can we make the community better? How can we help those less fortunate? And so every year, they have this competition, and it's, if I remember right, it's called the Makeable Challenge, and it's how can you make assistive tools. And when he first mentioned to me, I was at a district where they weren't, believing in this stuff. And I said, you know what? I'm going into another district. Do you mind if I just kind of use some of your stuff? Just, I'm not going to enter it because I don't think they're going to be happy with it. But let me kind of show like proof of concept. And so what they do is, and they have everything there. The teacher goes in, and it's like, all right, they do have to do some part of it. Like they do have to learn some things, but really they go in, and there's like 4 case studies that they can use to create examples for. But they really push, do you know anybody in the community that has a need? They're missing a digit, they had an accident, now they're missing from, here on, they need a new hand, arm. But it's gone beyond that, where they've created with, I saw one, it's like a little controller with the microbit to activate things for someone that needs assistance with something. And it all centers around 3D printing. And then they offer lots of tools on how to create things. They have samples and so on. And you sign up and it's free. And guess what? The kids compete and then they can win. I think even like 3D printers and other things. For me, that's one of the best examples, because sometimes teachers are like, well, how do I get started? I've never done PBL. How can I don't know how to look at this tool and turn it into a project for history. Like with 3D printing for me would be like, okay, you're doing history. What era? Okay, I'll make their own little Spartan helmets, but add flair to it. Like, and then while they're doing that, they have to look them up and get some information. But I can think of it off the top of my head sometimes, not all the time, because I've been doing it for years. But what I like about Jason's program is just boom, here you go. It's just there, and I just think what they do is fantastic, because they have nothing about it is, pay this, pay that. It's, what, here's our here's our program, here's everything, and I'll even send it to you in the chat, Tim. if you want to take a quick look at it when we're done. But yeah, he's like my hero. I see what he does. I'm like, man, I got to get to that level. How do I get there? Because you see the kids' reactions, and versus, hey, I made this and sold it for $5. Yeah, but when a kid goes, that person's walking because of me, changes, it totally blows their mind. Or I made, this person's able to grip things because of something I invented, my design. And when they realize, wait, there's probably thousands more that are going to need this and use it. And that happened to me once. I'm going a little long, but my students had a challenge when I said, here's a child with autism and ADHD. How do you help her? They made their own fidget cube with like one side of it with like they had a piece cut out so you could rub your finger. It had bumps, spikes. And I did a workshop in the summer, and there was a younger student there. He had just got out of high school, was going to be a teacher. And on the side, he said, hey, can you send me that? I'm like, yeah, that maybe it's for somebody. It's for me. I said, can you share that here? And he was willing to share in the group. And I told him, no pressure. And he goes, yeah, let me talk about it. And he goes, can I have the design? He goes, and share with anybody I think will need it. I went back and I saw that the students that made it the following year at the junior high, he started crying. It's like they were so happy. They're like, what? Who? I'm like, yeah, he's going to get it to as many people as he can, this kid. I said, and he's going to be a teacher. I go, so you guys made an impact for nothing. I mean, it costs zero, I said. So that's the kind of project. Yeah, I like for them to do little keychains at first, but I want to get them up there.
Yeah. Love those stories, and my heart is so full. Jesus, thank you for sharing them. I think about the design process, which should start with empathizing with users, right? Understanding users' needs, and the examples you gave are absolutely the best examples, really. I mean, Spartan helmets, maybe a little bit of a different challenge. That's a really cool angle, but some of the other projects that actually address real-life needs, that's incredible. Thank you for joining us, Teachers on Fire. If you're getting value from this conversation, give this video a like on whatever platform you're coming to us from this morning. Makerspaces, Jesus, are such a huge asset in school buildings today. And if I could share a lament, I'm in a crowded school building, a newer building, but it's quite crowded, and we do not have a makerspace. So I'm forced to teach applied design to elementary students without a designated room for it. And that really... It's a lament, yeah. I have to be honest. But when you think about your ideal makerspace, you're designing a school, what are some of the things that are in it? You can take that in many different directions, but describe your dream makerspace for us.
I think for me, it has to have a progression like system, and it has to make sense. So starting where it's, I'm a non-techie teacher. It could, and I don't want to sound like I'm talking about teachers that have been teaching a long time, because I've met teachers that are right out of college that are been in this for a couple of years, and they're like, no, I don't know how to use that. I think it's kind of like a misconception that, oh, they're young, they gotta know tech. No, they grew up around tech and certain kinds of tech. But for me, I think the biggest thing is starting simple. Some Play-Doh, modeling clay, the kind that dries in the air, popsicle sticks, googly eyes, starting with things like that, Connects, Tinker Toys, Legos. One time I went and bought a giant tub of Connects at the swap meet, and the guy's like $50, and I went like this. He goes, all right, 40. I'm like, I'm doing the math. I'm like, where am I gonna fit it? That's all I'm doing. So I'm like, he goes, I'll tell you what, you give me 20, I'll even throw in the tub. I was like, dude, I was gonna give you $50, but I mean, that was like, it was huge for my classroom, because I had so many ideas, because now I had access to it. So you mentioned yours. So you have a little bit of space. I would start small, because I feel like once you can prove like, hey, look what they're doing, maybe if I have more room, I can get a bigger, laser cutter. There's small laser cutters like desktop. They're like this big. You won't do the biggest projects, but they're there. And I think that's what you have to do. And I think the number one thing I would say first, if a principal reached out and said, hey, your district leadership, we want to design a makerspace, make it for us. The first thing I would say, well, what's your goal? Is it to allow teachers to create more innovatively? Is it because you want to spark an interest in like the sciences and technology, those kinds of careers, or something else? Like, what is it you want to do? Because teachers can teach innovatively, and they don't need to have high-tech tools. But if they're already kind of there, then let's move over and get something okay, a little more advanced. But I think I would say first read the room and then figure out what do they need. Now, if you told me, look, anything in there, I mean, I'd have, everything I mentioned. I'd have, 3D printers. I'd have, if I could, I'd have a water jet cutter in there too. Those are cool. Um, but if it was for elementary, I'd say yeah, like a X tool or a Glowforge, both easy to use. Bamboo printers, easy to use. Crickets, I fell in love with them the last year. I didn't see the hype, but I love them now. Um, Sublimation tools, VR and AR, I think are huge. I think right now the price is the problem with VR, but that's something else. And I think really it's how you present it. And we just opened one on Monday at one of our elementaries. And what I mentioned was don't see the robot corner and go, I have to. But no, there's robots for you. We have indies. They use color coded pads from Sphero. Then we have Spheros. Then we have their ollies that they don't make anymore. But this school had like 40 of them in the boxes. I'm like, do you know what these are? They go like 30 miles an hour. They're rugged. These are great. And they have drones. But do they have to have all that? No, but eventually get to that. And so for me, it would be, what does that school need? What does the population say? The teachers, are they half and half? Some are high tech, low techy, all non techy. Then let's put a few easy to use tools and let me go in and you need somebody to kind of lead it too. I went to a district and they have makerspaces and there's a certificated teacher that runs it. The teachers don't go in there. They just go and say, hey, I want to attach something that you can do to this content standard that I feel like the kids are not hip to it yet, or they're having a hard time, or want it more engaging. That's perfect right there, I think. And just build on it. It doesn't take. It's not going to happen in 1 year. That's the other thing. Mm-hmm. If you think your teachers are going to run in there 3D printing, laser cutting, sublimation by June, they're not. Some might. Let them be the leaders and let them get other people. Give them extra hours. Hey, go train some of the staff when they ask, I'll pay you for it. I mean, that gets them even more motivated to learn too, because you're getting, compensation is another way of showing, hey, I appreciate you. And I know we go above and beyond as teachers, but when we see it, I mean, we're not buying a Lamborghini, but I mean, at the same time, it's helping us kind of say, hey, you know what, I'm valued. Let me keep learning. I know I kind of went off right there. Sorry.
No, that's a great mini rant right there that I think building leaders need to think about. Thank you so much for sharing so many ideas and brands and models.
I'll help you, Tim.
I love that you brought in.
I'm going to charge you this much to help you, Tim. Don't worry.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, what a dream. And you touched on drones, by the way. That's another piece close to my heart. And I do want to come back to AR and VR as well. That's coming up here in a moment. Something else that I want to talk about is game design. And I've used Minecraft successfully with my 7th graders. I think about Roblox, and I've never used it in my practice, but I know Roblox has an aspect to it where people can create and play their own games. And to me, that's really intriguing because it sounds to me like a lot of innovation and applied design is possible in that space. How do you think about the possibilities of game design as a teaching tool in the classroom?
So just little history on me. I started as a math teacher, did bad. I even had a tear in my eye when I had my observation and they told me this is not working. I'm like, great, go back to whatever I was doing before. And no, they said, go into, you're going to go into 5th, you're a multiple subject teacher. That's what we should have done. Went to a Q conference, and that changed everything. So I would teach 5th, and then I taught 6th a couple times because I followed a class one time, and then I just stayed in 6th. That was during the pandemic, which was very smart. I think my principal made a great point. She goes, follow them. She goes, you're the only one that we can let follow because that teacher is retiring. I'm like, oh, perfect. But what I would always do with 5th and 6th grade, and I've done this with other grade levels as low as 4th, on one of these, I do 3 game projects. They do Kane's Arcade. Have you ever seen that video, Tim?
No.
I'll put it in the chat for you right now while I'm talking. Kane's Arcade, this kid made his own cardboard arcade game because he couldn't afford, his family couldn't afford to get him a real arcade game. So he made his own. And so the kids make their own cardboard arcade games. One thing that I had that I loved it. And again, let's get 3D printers in there. Kids wanted like these little hoppy frogs, and they couldn't find them at the 99-cent store. And they're like, and they look and they're like, could we print them? Oh yeah. Everybody in the class, well, why didn't you say anything? You didn't ask. I said anything in the class could be used. There you go. From there, they go to a board game project, and the stakes are higher because they have to present it like as a company, and they interviewed by myself, and if I can get somebody else with me. And actually, I'm hoping not next week, the week after, I'm gonna go in my shirt and tie and everything. And we did a mock one, and one of the teams, I said, no, I can't. And I said, because you're not letting your partner, I keep asking your partner the question. I told them afterwards, once I went back to teacher mode. And I told them that. But for me, the biggest part is the writing, and they don't realize it. The rules have to be precise. And I told them, we think about precision in math. I said, but the words we use, I go, can carry a lot of weight. And if I misspeak, someone might say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about, or he just offended me. And I might not even realize it. I said, so we have to be very precise. And then the interview part, I told them, who's going to go to, what schools do you guys want to go to after high school? Oh, UCLA, Stanford. They have big schools. I'm like, all those schools are going to interview you. And if you don't know how to talk to somebody, even through Zoom, like look straight into the camera. I say, you can't have your camera off. I go, what are you going to do? Any job. So for me, that's the biggest aspect of it. Yes, the game design part is great because they make a cardboard and then a wood version of it. And then they have to come up with like pricing on it. The third one is video games. And the one I love to go to is Roblox. I mean, not Roblox, sorry. But I do love Roblox too. Bloxels. Bloxels is great. Okay. Now, if there's no iPads available, I like Make Code Arcade because it's free. Or, and this one is also, it'll work on any device, but it's paid. So Bloxels, you got to pay for the license. It's not too bad though, the pricing. There's one called Construct 3. And I actually bought a game for my PS5 that was built in Construct 3. I was like, this is incredible. And I taught that a couple summers ago for a nonprofit, and I fell in love with it. I'm like, this is great. So for me, what I think people have to understand, it's game design, not game play. They're making the game.
Right. Yes.
And if you've never made any kind of game, whether it's a PE game, a math game, board game, the hardest part is the sweet spot. Because if it's too hard, it's frustrating. You go, never mind. But if it's too easy, you're just like, it's boring. There has to be somewhere in the middle where like, okay, I got 100 points. I'm going to go for 300 points or whatever. Oh, I made it. Cool. Oh, I didn't make it the second time. That part gets the brain working in such a different way. You talk about critical thinking. That's true critical thinking. Because if I go and I present my board game and they find one flaw and they say, come back in a week, but make it better. Fix that flaw, but I want more. I want this better, bigger, whatever. You don't have a month. Okay, a week. How can I get it there? So there's critical thinking that, it's not like I have to throw these brakes on this car or change a tire on it. I have to build something, and I have to fix something that's really my design. And I think that aspect of it is where teachers, if they've never tried it, it's once they see it once, they're like, oh my God, I love project-based learning. I always start with game design. Oh, do Kane's Arcade. Here, I have an electric cutter. I always offer tools that make it easier because I don't want the teachers to hit like a roadblock and go, you know what? Yeah, I started it, but it got too hard. Because once they start to see and hear the kids speak, that's the other thing. The language they start using, you keep using technical language. Oh, you mean this? Oh, yeah. They start speaking like that because they're like, oh, that's the right word. My teacher keeps repeating me, but they keep changing that word. They'll pick up on it. Mm-hmm. And you're going to also open up sparks that they would have never had anywhere else to think, wait, I can be a game designer. I don't want to make video games, but I can make my own board games, like Settlers of Catan and things like that. So for me, I think game design is huge. But teachers have to understand the kids are making the game. They might have to play a little bit like in Roblox or Minecraft to get the hang of it, but they're designing.
Rich stuff there. That's incredible. And that's exactly what I was thinking about, by the way, when I talked about lamenting my lack of a makerspace in my context is the cardboard arcade, because I know the next school over from me, there's a teacher there that is doing exactly that. And I think the opportunities for integration with math and probability are so rich. So that's something I'm going to keep in my mind, and hopefully someday a makerspace will appear. But in the meantime, we'll do the best we can with the space we have. I want to ask you one more question about technology, Jesus. And by the way, you are so incredibly knowledgeable. This is just a joy to sit back and listen to. But we've seen a rise and fall in the buzz around AR and VR. At one time, maybe 5 years ago, we were talking about the metaverse and how the metaverse was coming. That hasn't really materialized, at least not quite in the way that some envisioned it. But in the meantime, we have big tech continuing to come out with these innovations. Yesterday we saw, or a couple of days ago, we saw Elon come out with his robo-taxi. And then earlier this week, we saw Meta come out with their lightweight glasses. And I'm forgetting the name just now, but I'm sure you saw them. Yes. So where do you think this is going? Do you have a renewed sense that something is about to change in mainstream education, or do you see it as still a price point problem, as you mentioned earlier?
I think there's two problems. I'm going to use video games as a way to explain it. The first Xbox, the original fat one, that's like this wide.
Yeah.
It was dying. Nobody wanted it till it had that killer app, Halo. Then everybody had to have Halo. And then they're like, wait, what's LAN play? And people that played on PC were like, oh, that's something old school. Everybody knows what that is. But not if you're a console player. And then everybody wanted an Xbox. And then they started paying attention to everything else there. I think VR and AR, they don't have like their Kahoot, their quizzes, their, Google Slides. They don't have that thing that people go, you know what, I have to have that for the classroom.
Got it.
And I think the first thing that they would have to have is management. How do I manage it? Because there's one called Class VR. And you can use VR in the classroom. I can say, oh, Tim and his little friend are being loud. Not that you're being loud in class, but I can block you out and everybody else can see it. And it's kind of like, hey, it's like if I closed your screen and said, hey, I need you to pay attention. Nope, let me activate it again from my computer. The problem with it is it's all static images or like video. I can't wear it and then walk around and I'm walking, like if I'm using, say, the HTC Vive or the Meta headsets, the Quest. So it has one aspect that I think is great. The other one's not bad. Don't get me wrong, especially I mentioned progression. That's a good place to start. But how do we get them over to something where they're actually making something? For me, I love using them. But the problem, again, is how can we get other teachers? Well, the first one's going to be management, I think. And the other one is the price point. I know like the Quest 2 is not too bad. But again, we have 33 students average in our fourth, I think starting fourth, or for sure fifth, but probably in fourth grade all the way up to high school.
Those are big classes.
I don't know how many students. How many students do you guys have in your class?
25 max at my school.
25. So you would still need 12 headsets. So you're talking $4 or $5 grand. Right. Where are we going to store it? There's a lot of things. Like they haven't come up with the educational package yet. Like here you go. And here's the other problem. Something that I learned having the Quest headset. So if somebody's like, I'm going to go buy 15 of them, I would wait for one reason. We love Tilt Brush. Have you ever used Tilt Brush to draw?
No.
Oh, it's amazing. Like I do a circle and I can look at it from the side over here. Like it's true drawing in 3D. I can walk around my creation. If more than 3 students start to use it on one account, it kicks people off. So we're trying to figure out, do they have like an enterprise, program? Like we can buy it multiple times, kind of like when we do with our Apple, apps, because we have iPads and Macs throughout our district. So that's something also that I think it's not educational friendly, but not because it doesn't have educational tools. They don't have a solution for, hey, I got 20 kids and I need 20 headsets. Do I have to create, 10 accounts because the license only works on 2 devices at the same time? Teachers are going to go, I can't deal with that. IT is going to be like, we need a better solution because we don't have the time to be managing 10 accounts. Like that's not there. But the tools that are on there are incredible. Just some of the experiences for history, science. The Vive, I think, is the better headset because it does offer more horsepower. But again, there's no educational wing on Steam, the Steam store. I'm not going to be able to go on there and go, I just need education. I'm going to be like, okay, this is Fighting Ninjas. This is a coffee simulator. Okay, no, I need stuff for me. It's not very well organized. So I think if they were to aim towards education and put a lot of like intent, not just hey we threw education and everything, like it made sense. They talked to teachers and understood what's really needed. Just having it organized, I think teachers would dip their toes. But I think above teachers, they look at it and go, well, how are we going to manage this? Where's the safety? Because if they're on the quest and they're smart, they can start surfing the net on it. And okay, so how do we restrict that? There's so much there. So I think the price has come down quite a bit because I got the Vive donated to my classroom in 2019, 2018, 2019. Still amazing piece of hardware. But if you buy one now, you're talking 1,200 for the headset, and you need a gaming PC. So you're looking at $2,000 at least to get one into your classroom. For me, the other one is a better option, but then the price point is solved. But how do we get it into teachers' classrooms? But if you do have one, I would say Tilt Brush, Sculptor VR, and Gadgeteer. Sculptor allows you to, of course, 3D printing too, how to sculpt in virtual reality, and you can extract it and 3D print it. Gadgeteer is the one that I'm like waiting for a teacher to say, I'll do that. It's a virtual Rube Goldberg designer. So they make a Rube Goldberg machine. It's the one where, you put a ball and it hits a shoe and it does this and that. And it's a contraption. Well, I had a teacher see it and she wanted to try it, but she just hasn't had the time. Because they did do Rube Goldberg's, but in person. And she goes, I wish they could have seen one and messed with it before. I go, I got this, gave her the headset, and she's like, I got to have this. So there's apps on there that would serve a purpose, but I think it's everything else is not educational friendly, as in managing it.
Wow. I'm not even going to try to summarize all of that, but a lot of good information. Jesus, that was so good. That's like, I feel like I need to go back and catalog some of what you shared right there. I think my brother is trying to point me to the correct name, maybe Ray-Ban, I think, or maybe that's a joke. Ray-Ban, that's a joke. Okay, thank you, Andrew. The EdTech Throwdown podcast is here. Welcome, guys. They're here watching on X this morning. Good morning, Tim and Teachers on Fire. This convo is so valuable and relatable for what I do in the classroom. Awesome guest selection. I have to agree with you there. They also ask a question here, Jesus. Do you find that the VR headsets go out of date quick? That's my hesitation. So you're welcome to address that one if you like. And they also say, can you do a station rotation so less headsets and accounts are needed? That speaks to the problem that you mentioned in terms of seats for students or capping out at 3 seats or that kind of idea. And then we've also got Improv on YouTube. I'm not familiar with this account, but welcome. We're glad you're here. The killer app for education, educational VR is going to be whoever comes up with a magic school bus VR app. Take the kids on a VR trip to ancient Greece or inside the human body. Field trips without leaving the classroom. Awesome stuff. All right. Is there anything there that you want to touch on, Jesus?
I think the station rotation thing works because that's what we do. We'll take enough for half the class to do something. And so, again, you have to be very explicit and, okay, I have to come up with a project or activity where the half that's doing VR is going to trade and the other half of it has to be like related to it.
Right.
And so that, but you could also say, okay, guys, you guys work on, this thing right now. And it's 2 projects at the same time, one related to VR and the other one to something else. And I think that would help. Because, if you're going to buy 33, first of all, where are you going to put all that stuff? It's a lot of boxes, a lot of headsets. But I think having enough where they pair up. We do one with the class VR sets where 2 partners work together, and it's called See Through My Eyes. And so they look at ancient Egypt, but I have the headset on. I don't let Tim, you're my partner, see it. And I tell you, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Draw this. Okay. And then I see this. Okay. It's inside of a pyramid and it's hieroglyphics. And then they let the partner that was drawing see the image. Oh, okay. Oh, you could have, and they talk about what language could these language. That's the key. They don't know that they're learning more language. They're like, you should have said this. Oh, that I couldn't think of the word to describe, something that's not square shape. You mean rectangular. Then they switch jobs, different image, and then repeat and rinse and repeat. And for them, they're experiencing VR. Some have said for the first time, but for me, I'm like the writing, the drawing is cool. I love art, but then the speaking. They talk about why they couldn't communicate better. But I think a station would be great to start with. I think starting small with any piece of tech, especially if you're like at a school or a district where they're not believers yet. I say yet because I think eventually they can be. Start small. Ask for one 3D printer, or if you bought it yourself, okay, take the hit. That's what I did a lot. But I think for VR, again, it's how do we manage it? And then those glasses are cool. The ones that your brother was talking about. I've seen other ones called Vitcher, and it's like a giant screen TV, but on your sunglasses. I want to buy them, but I haven't bought them for myself yet. I should.
Yeah. Well, I was watching Colin and Samir, who are a couple of my favorite creator YouTubers, talk about the difference between Meta's new glasses and the Apple Vision Pro. And the Vision Pro is no doubt really cool. I haven't tried it, but it's simply not practical, right? You can't walk around in public. I mean, some people made videos of walking around in public, but it looks ridiculous. These glasses from Meta actually look like they have some potential for applied use in the real space. All right, in real life, that is. If you are enjoying this conversation, consider subscribing to the Teachers on Fire channel on YouTube. And I see a lot of people joining us on X this morning, which is really, really fun as well. So give this conversation a like or a repost, and we'd so appreciate that. Jesus, we're going to wrap up with some rapid fire questions. My first one for you, share about a personal habit or a productivity hack that contributes to your success and keeps your fire burning. Is there something that you do on the regular or on the daily that helps keep you productive?
I make lists because otherwise I don't stay organized, and I'm like, oh, I forgot to write that down on I have a little checklist app, and I have a little notepad I have with me, just because I know myself, I'll forget.
No, absolutely. We're at that age, right, where if it doesn't go in the list or the calendar, it is gone. I'm there too. We've talked about so many tools. Is there one that you really value in your professional practice? Again, something that keeps you organized or efficient, or perhaps something that really stands out as a new creative tool that you've come to love and appreciate?
I love using Canva.com. They have like an AI like assistant, and it does like 70% of the heavy lifting. Because I could go into Google Slides and make a cool slideshow, but they only have so many colors, so many options. That one, it just goes boom. And if I put related to virtual reality, to a makerspace, most of the information I just put myself, but like some of the elements and colors they add are great. And then they have so many cool features. I know there's a premium side to it. We have it in our district. I would say that is probably the one I've been using a lot in the last year. And I think for teachers that they want to have cool visuals, but they're like, whoa, I just found a picture online. I wish I could do better presentations. There you go. It does it for you.
Tell us about someone that we need to follow on Education X, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Teacher TikTok, and share why they've been inspiring you lately.
You know what? I would say if you want to follow someone with a wealth of knowledge, follow Martin Cisneros on Instagram. He's with Adobe. He's like the Adobe guy. He's so knowledgeable. He's been using tech for, I don't want to say 30 years on him. Say, dude, I'm not that old, but yeah, I think it's about 30 years. He's been teaching for a long time. Sorry, Martin. But he's just so passionate. And you ask him something that's not even like about Adobe related, like something else with tech, or he knows so much. And if he doesn't fake it. He'll say, go talk to this person or go talk to that person. But he's a guy that if his fire ever went out for teaching, I don't know when it happened, because I just saw him over last weekend at a conference, and he's always like, hey, so hype. And that's what you need to, and it's genuine. That's the other thing. He's super genuine. That's the other thing. I think you might see other speakers and they sound kind of, it's an act or whatever. But with him, it's just super natural, and he's just great to talk to about anything. And he just has a great head for teaching.
That's a great shout out. As we wrap up, Jesus, what are the best ways for the Teachers on Fire listening who have been inspired by your message and no doubt are thinking about new projects, new activities, new creative and design work for their students to try? How can they connect with you?
I use Instagram a lot. So if not Instagram, it's TikTok. And, if you don't need to follow me to message me and you want to ask me a question, I respond usually pretty quickly. I try to make time to help teachers, especially if they're like, you know what, I have a printer in a box and the corner's been there for a year. Or, they're asking us, what should we get, for our makerspace to get started? Any of those, but I'm very active on TikTok and Instagram. And ask a question. I usually respond right away, or I'll say, hey, you know what, here's a quick answer, but let's talk about it more. And, in the messages, I'll send my email, cell phone, whatever they need. Because one thing that, and I know we were talking about it earlier, Tim, before we started, is just a little side note. If I help you, I'm not going to charge you guys. Okay. It's free. Don't think, oh, he's going to say, oh, does your district need PD? No. If their district needs PD, that's something different. But if it's just you by yourself, hey, I need like 30 minutes. Could you do a video call and show me, like, why is my printer doing this? Or my laser cutter stop being accurate? Or, you know what, I have all this stuff. What project can we come up with? I'll help you, because I remember my first few years, I was at districts where I had to buy that 3D printer myself. And I bought a couple, Tim, that they're in the trash because they were not, I had to cheap out. And then I realized, okay, for this, I can't go so cheap. But if I had someone that could have said, hey, you know what, come try a couple of my printers, or let me show you, or let me send you this. I have lesson designs. I don't mind sharing freely, help you modify them for your grade level or subject. But more, I think it's just asking for help, because I think sometimes we go and say, I'm the teacher. Just like we say, the kids look at us and expect us to know everything. I think sometimes we think, well, we have to be able to teach it on our own with everything. And that's not the case. The more help we get, the more we can grow ourselves.
Fantastic message. And that's a great offer, Teachers on Fire, that Jesus just put out there. So make sure you take advantage of that. If you've listened to this conversation, if you've listened to it and you have some questions and you want to follow up on some of the points that Jesus dropped here, make sure to reach out and connect. And he's just that kind of an educator.
My email blows up, Tim, I'm not going to help you anymore.
Don't let me down, brother. But no, definitely give him a follow at some of the places that we listed. And it's really fun to hear that you are active on TikTok. I think that's such a great emerging platform for educators, for sure. Hey, thank you so much.
On this for sure.
It's evolved a lot. It's no longer Musically. And wow, I'll tell you what, I have a teacher TikTok account, and all I see in my feed is just teacher stuff. So you can narrow down the algorithm to really zone in on exactly what it is that you're interested in. Thank you so much, Jesus, for sharing some of your precious Saturday time with the podcast today. I've really, really enjoyed everything you've had to share. I've learned a lot. You've really stretched me, and I knew that would happen. So thank you so much. Teachers on Fire, I'm your host, Tim Cavey, and I'm so grateful that you too decided to spend some of your day listening to this podcast. I hope that in some way the content you heard today from Jesus Huerta sparked your thinking and ignited your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
I never answer to no, man, I still go, 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 go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day. I'll be making moves till I'm